Well, hello. I'm Kelly Clement, documentary programmer for the 2021 Mill Valley Film Festival. And I want to thank all of our sponsors and our supporters and our donors and everyone who helps put us into this place of the year. And thank you for turning out to the festival in this very challenging situation we find ourselves in. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce the directors of The Rescue, Jimmy Chin and Chai Vasarhelyi. We're very honored to be screening your wonderful film at the Mill Valley Film Festival, Jimmy and Chai. The Rescue had its premiere at the Telluride Film Festival, right? And then also recently it screened at the Toronto International Film Festival, where it won the People's Choice Awards, and it will be in theaters very soon. Now, I have to admit that this is one of the first documentaries I programmed this year. And how could I not, since you have such a special connection with Northern California and our film festival? We screened the Oscar-winning Free Solo at the 2018 Mill Valley Film Festival, where it won the Audience Award for Best Feature Film. And now we have The Rescue, and it's one of the most powerful and captivating documentaries I've seen in a long time. So let's just jump right in. It's
great. Thank you for having us again.
Great. Now, this is a very complex and layered work, deceptively so, but it obviously went through many different stages of production. So how did the journey of the film begin? After Free Solo, what made you decide to go from the heights to the depths?
I think like everybody who was watching this story around the world, we were just personally invested. You know, it was a story about children. It was about Asian children. We have two of those. And it was also a story about coming together. And I'm sure if you think back to 2018, you know, we were in kind of dark political times. And finally, here was a story that was uplifting. I mean, and it was also kept you on your, you know, on the edge of your seat for most part. And like, I remember feeling there's no way these children could be alive, being like, just giving up hope and then being shocked when they were found and then ultimately rescued. So I think it's just a story that really moved us personally. And it had all the ingredients of like a thriller that actually is a story about something larger than itself that we love.
Yes, definitely. So where were you when this all happened?
We were in the States. I was in New York. Jimmy was probably in Wyoming, and my dad was in Australia. So I would wake up every morning to his updates, and then start following it on my side. And yeah, I mean, like so much of the world, we were watching from the outside.
Yeah. And I think, back to your first question too, if this story was like a confluence of layers and that both Chai and I are really drawn to, I think that human achievement and unlikely heroes and, human ingenuity, finding a solution to, something that seemed insurmountable with a ticking clock, that also appealed to us. But I think it is about that, the things that bring us together as humans and not divide us. And we thought it was an important story. And now feels even more poignant.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it had all those elements to it as it was unfolding for all of us around the world. And so could you just give a simple timeline of how this project developed and the steps you had to take to make this film, especially during a world lockdown during a pandemic?
So the film was originally started by another filmmaker and who kind of left the project. And so we understood that National Geographic had the rights and we'd been tracking the progress of the project. And so the moment that happened, we asked, can we please have this? And it was quite seamless. They said, of course, we'd love you to take it. And so we had planned our first trip to Thailand for February 2020. We had, so end of January 2020, we had 3 different cinematographers drop out of the shoot because it was becoming very clear something was wrong in the world.
Oh boy.
And so we ended up having to cancel just because, I mean, if you think back, everything was so uncertain. We didn't want to be stuck on a different side of the border with our children in America. And so what transpired were many, many, many Zoom interviews, and getting to know the divers and like the Thai Navy SEALs over Zoom was tricky and not our normal process. At the same time, this film had great challenges in that the cave is pitch black. The water, if you're lucky enough to film underwater, is pitch black and muddy. No civilian was allowed to film. It's halfway around the world and in Thai, and then you add a pandemic. So we were kind of like living off of fumes, going through all this, like the news footage that was available. So like CNN would have, and it was all outside the cave, like CNN would have one shot and then a local Thai news service would have the other shot. And so we just had like a 2-shot, I cannot tell you how crazy an archival process it was. Yeah, but I mean, everyone was stuck at home, so it was kind of like appropriate in some way.
Well, how did you first meet Rick and John?
We first met Rick and John on Zoom.
Yeah.
We were introduced by and to date, like we actually have never met Dr. Harris in person because he lives in Australia and the COVID restrictions are so strict. So yes, we met over Zoom, and ultimately we did end up meeting in person in October of 2020, and have since become, good friends.
Yes.
Well, that was, for me, one of the most engaging things about the film were the interviews. They were so personal and made you feel like you were just sitting down in your living room talking to these people. Very commendable.
Well, it kind of was true, right? We were in the living room talking to people that just happened to be on the other side of the world, right?
Right. Well, that was really a nice touch of it, because you really got to know the key players in this.
I think just to that point, like the rescue transformed everyone who participated in it. So it's actually something that Rick and John wanted to speak about. Their lives are forever changed by it, and everyone who it touched, their lives were changed. So it was kind of like the special thing they were able to share, even though they're not necessarily the most open people or like, socially well-adjusted people.
Well, the editing was the other thing I loved about it. It was just wonderfully paced. And how did you work with your editor, and who did just such a wonderful job of seamlessly making you feel like you were right there as it all transpired? Nothing was rushed, and the suspense was just so intense.
We work with like the great Bob Eisenhart, who edited Meru and Free Solo. And I think the one thing that would kind of distinguishes our filmmaking style is we take a long time to edit. Because I think we all agree that like there's no point making these films unless you get it right. And so in terms of being visceral, like, the story is great, but there are all these constraints. And so we had been pursuing, there was a rumor of this special footage that the Thai Navy SEALs had. And, after 2 years of negotiation, going to Thailand, et cetera, we were able to get the footage. And I think that also really contributes. It finally gave Bob enough to place you there. I mean, and like, for example, like when you see the child being anesthetized, it's actually real footage from Dr. Harris. When you see, and then like you go through a bit of a reenactment, and then when the children are pulled out, that's the real Thai Navy SEAL footage of the 200 people passing the child hand to hand. Wow. So like it just gave you the stuff that, especially since we weren't there in person, you finally could understand the scale.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit more about creating the reenactments.
It's always really important to us to be authentic. And since we weren't there during the event, and this is the only film that Chai and I have worked on together where we weren't there, for the principal action. And so just to really get a sense of how they did it, we brought most of the divers together. And really the request was, show us exactly how you did it, and what's it like to go through these caves, and instead of through an interview, they got to show us. And so we were able to film that, and it was really enlightening for us on a lot of different levels, because it's clearly very, very technical. Cave diving is extremely dangerous. I mean, just depending on all the equipment and the technical aspects. But I think the thing that moved us the most was when they showed us how they tied the kids' hands behind their backs with zip ties and tied their ankles together with the zip ties and then put their faces underwater. And I mean, just even seeing that, not in a deep cave, 2 kilometers into a submerged, space, it really drilled in the point of how wild and outrageous this, this rescue really was.
How was that recreated?
We were in a tank and the real divers showed us how they did it. And we had child actors. And we just went through it, step by step. I mean, again, this was a documentary, so our budget for reenactments was quite modest. We actually really lucked out because our underwater cinematographer found on the Pinewood set another person's cave, like from a big action movie. So suddenly we had double the cave, which was kind of a really big deal because I don't know how we would have done it with the cave we did have. And then another little known fact is, do you know how people muddy the water in a tank? They use broccoli. They use ground broccoli because it's so expensive to drain a tank if it gets too muddy, and somehow the sediment of broccoli works best. But who knew? And our favorite was when Rick found out this after the fact. He's like, I'm allergic to broccoli. And we're like, oh.
Oh man. That's quite a scoop, broccoli.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another wonderful thing about this is the way you let the Thai officials and others tell their story of how their country came together with so many other outsiders that were involved. It's just a wonderful example of the world we need right now.
No, thank you for saying that. I think that was one of the reasons why Jimmy and I were incredibly compelled to try to make this film. As Asian filmmakers, we felt that we were in a unique position to be able to listen close enough and take the time to really be able to try to understand the various points of view at play here. And while it was tricky to get that access, it was incredibly difficult to get the footage. It was the good fight. And ultimately, I think I'm very happy that people are understanding that Thai point of view that's in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is an East meets West, idea that happens in this film, and in reality, obviously. But we really tried to bring that out because, like I said, it didn't matter what country or continent or culture that people came from. They all had that common humanity of wanting to save these children, and really basically did the impossible to make it happen.
Yeah, it's incredible. How did you negotiate with them to get the footage?
Well, they said no, probably 10 different ways, many, many times over Zoom. And so, but, and we just heard this rumor. So essentially the divers, John and Rick, John said, I remember carrying a GoPro for the Thai Navy SEALs, and I remember filming this motivational speech, like cheer with the children. But even as the time transpired, he's like, but maybe I didn't, because he never saw the images. He's like, maybe this is like a vagary of my own memory. And that alone was enough fodder to kind of motivate us to try to get this footage. And so finally, when I got my second vaccine, I got on a plane to Thailand and did the, mandatory quarantine and knocked on the admiral's door and was like, let's talk. I know you said no, but here we are. And we thought it was going to be 90 minutes of footage, and it was 87 hours.
Oh my God.
And subsequently, the admiral's wife, was a journalist, came to New York and helped us with our edit. She's an executive producer on the film. And, I think they were just moved that we cared, basically. That we valued their participation in the story. And also there's Thai special forces. So it's very against the culture or the ethos to self-promote in any way.
Well, you pulled it off. Amazing.
Well, it was really Chai's persistence. I think I'm a persistent climber and stubborn, and but Chai really went the distance.
Has to get
I didn't think we were going to be able to get it. I didn't think we were going to be able to convince them, but.
It was like my deep sense of justice. Like, if it exists, the story is so important. People need to see it, and you've got to feel it, and you can only feel it if you've got the footage. So there. Like,
oh, I wanted it just as badly. I just did not think, I was like, because they run covert operations. This is not the culture of a highly specialized covert ops team, And I was like, there's no way. And
so that's why they're the blurred faces in the footage.
And that was a compromise, which was a happy compromise for us, I think, because a lot of the Thai Navy SEALs that are in the shots are, operating currently. And so, you couldn't show their.
I mean, but it was very official. Like, a Thai Navy SEALs accompanied the footage to America. Like, it was all like very.
They wouldn't upload it. They flew with the hard drive to our studios. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure they were like looking at security and being like, okay, lock the doors and this whole thing.
We're like, Little Mermaid is next door. I promise you the security is pretty high.
Well, I think you should be promoted to international relationships.
I was thinking more of a spy. Like, I kind of would like that sexy, like, I think James Bond is in our future, like that sort of thing.
Well, speaking of future, what do you have any plans for the next project?
Well, we actually have quite a Northern Californian story. Jimmy, do you want to?
Yeah, we have a few different projects. One of the films that we've been working on actually for quite some time is the story about Doug Tompkins, Chris Tompkins, Yvonne Chouinard, and some of kind of our heroes in the outdoor world who not only defined kind of the surf, mountain, van life culture, but turned out to be the greatest conservationists of our time and had extraordinary stories. And much like a lot of the films, I think people kind of know the general story or the outcomes of the story, but I think what actually
well maybe not. I'm not sure I do. Can just a little.
Well, I mean, the end result was that, they've protected over 14 million acres and turned them into national parks and handed this land over to the Chilean and Argentinian people. It was the biggest private land handover in history, period. Wow. And they spent 25 years against all odds building this thing that I think not very many people believed in. And, but it also, documents kind of their lives getting to that moment.
Well, we talk about this story very differently. Like, I'm like, it's a huge fat love story, kind of like Out of Africa, where like two people find love in their 40s and just.
Oh, that's the story? Oh, we should talk about this.
Just kidding. I don't know. It's like if you can see the world and how they see each other and how they see the earth, like it's a very moving kind of like.
As you can see now, you get a sense of how we work together.
Yeah, it's unfolding right before my eyes. It's great. Well, thank you so much for making this wonderful, wonderful documentary. And I wish you all the best of luck in getting it out there so everybody can see it. Everybody needs to see it.
Thank you. We're so excited for audiences to see it. And we worked really hard on it. And I hope we hope it moves people.
One last thing before we go, I just wanted to ask if any of the kids or the participants have been able to see this film yet.
So it's so interesting that you bring that up. When I went to Thailand, I wanted to meet all the people we'd interviewed over Zoom, and then also the children and the coach. And I also wanted to walk the cave. So when I met several of the kids and Coach Eck, they knew that we owned Dr. Harris's footage of them being anesthetized, and they asked me if they could see it. which, you know, as a mother even, or as like, you know, I was like, are we going to re-traumatize these children? But we have to show it. Like if they ask, of course we have to show it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm very happy we could give them the opportunity to see it before anyone else. And it was, I mean, I can't imagine having this like blank in my own mind of how like this most important event in my life, but I was anesthetized during it. So that it was very nice to be able to show them the rescue itself.
Were they in awe?
I mean, it's also kind of like a home movie, you know, like I think, you know, so it's like, it's how do you experience it? I'm not sure. I think everyone's different, especially when participants see themselves in a film. But yeah, it's the first time they'd seen it visualized. So they were pretty engaged in it.
Well, I know that you probably are very busy right now with your schedule, so I'm going to let you off easy. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Okay.